Have you ever imagined what would happen if the proud ruler of an 8-foot alien empire unexpectedly found herself carrying the child of a human crash survivor? That's exactly what unfolds in this thrilling tale of interstellar intrigue, forbidden alliance, and a pregnancy that shakes two civilizations to their core. From the moment Commander Rowan Reed's shuttle falls from the sky to Empress Zarina's shocking realization of their growing hybrid baby, every twist leads to a breathtaking confrontation that could alter the fate of the galaxy. Curious how they'll survive political betrayals, rogue warlords, and a frozen hostile planet. You won't want to miss a single pulse-pounding moment of this one-of-a-kind sci-fi saga. Listen through to the end to see if love, unity, and the promise of new life can truly triumph over centuries of fear and tradition. If you enjoy epic stories that blend high-stakes action with heartfelt drama, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring you more captivating tales. So stick around, buckle up, and share the journey with fellow fans of bold storytelling. Rowan Reed's heart hammered in his chest as he wrestled with the failing controls of his small survey shuttle, the Penumbra. Beneath him stretched a hostile, windswept terrain of ice and rock that glimmered under the cold light of a distant star. No one had ever charted this segment of the galaxy in detail. Just a footnote in the star maps filed by the GSF Horizon before it vanished behind a swirling anomaly. Now, here he was, Commander Rowan Reed, plummeting toward a frozen planet so remote that it didn't even merit an official name on colonial records. The official mission directive had seemed routine enough: investigate an anomalous energy signature, report back with preliminary data, and then reunite with the rest of the fleet. But something about the planet's electromagnetic field had fried his shuttle's systems the moment he entered the atmosphere. Now, Rowan fought to pull up before slamming into a glacial expanse, every console flickering in protest, each alarm shrieking a different warning. The Penumbra's hull groaned, shuddering like a wounded animal beneath the stress of atmospheric entry. Rowan clenched his jaw and tried to focus on the essential instruments. Displays blinked in erratic patterns, the autopilot refused to engage, and the thrusters only spat a flicker of flame before sputtering out entirely. "Come on, hold together," he muttered through clenched teeth, feeling sweat trickle down his forehead despite the frigid temperatures outside. The planet below was a sea of white, occasionally broken by jagged outcroppings of black, crystalline rock that jutted up like the teeth of a monstrous beast. In the corner of his eye, a swirl of golden static danced across a screen, indicating the unknown energy signature that had drawn him here in the first place. He wanted to curse the day the mission assignment landed on his desk, but it was too late for second-guessing. Survival was all that mattered. With a final squeal of tortured metal, the shuttle's last functional engine flickered and died. Gravity won out, sending the craft into a downward spiral. Rowan locked his arms, trying to keep the nose level. An impact at a steep angle would spell doom, but a belly-flop crash might offer at least some slim chance of walking away in one piece. He braced himself, ignoring the frantic alert from the altimeter as it ticked down toward zero. The forward viewport revealed a blur of white. Then the impact. A bone-rattling thud jolted every bone in his body, followed by a cacophony of tearing metal and cracking ice. The cabin lights burst in a final shower of sparks. Rowan's harness held, but the momentum slammed him hard into his seat, ripping a pained grunt from his lungs. Darkness swallowed the cockpit, lit only by a dim red emergency diode. For several seconds, he couldn't hear anything over the ringing in his ears. Then came the slow realization that he was upside down. The remains of the forward console dangled above his helmet, wires dangling like mechanical entrails. Blood trickled down his temple from a small cut, and for one absurd moment, he thought the droplets looked like little rubies floating in midair. With a hiss, the emergency canopy popped open, letting in a blast of sub-zero wind that stung his face. Mustering all his strength, Rowan released his harness and dropped to what had become the new floor of the cockpit. He allowed himself 2 shaky breaths before his training kicked in. First, he needed to check if there were any salvageable supplies. Second, he needed to see if he had any way to signal for rescue. Third, he needed to get his backside off this frozen rock before it killed him. Little did he know, fate and an alien empire had far greater plans for him than mere survival. Rowan rummaged through the overturned compartment, trying to keep his trembling hands steady. To his relief, his black and silver combat suit was largely intact, designed to protect him from hostile environments. It was a modular suit, crafted by the Galactic Survey Force's top engineers, equipped with thermal regulators that could stave off the lethal cold for several days, if the power supply held out. Right beside it, he found a portable pulse rifle, a field medikit, and a small cache of rations. He strapped the rifle across his back, slipped into the suit with practiced efficiency, and double-checked the helmet's readouts. All systems appeared functional enough, at least for now. Clambering out of the wreckage, he was immediately hammered by a wind so fierce it practically stole his breath. Shards of ice whipped across the landscape, and the twilight sky overhead cast everything in a pale, bluish-gray hue. The suit's visor displayed external temperature readings of -43 degrees Celsius. Even with the suit's thermal lining, he felt the cold biting at the edges of his joints. The horizon was a jagged line of ice formations and dark spires of alien rock. A quick scan showed no immediate structures or life signs, at least none that the battered sensor array could detect. That left him two choices: freeze to death, waiting at the crash site, or start moving in search of some kind of shelter. The storm made every step a battle. The snow reached almost to his knees, and the biting wind howled with a relentless fury. Still, Rowan forced himself onward, pushing across the bleak expanse. He tried to broadcast a wideband distress call from his suit's communication panel. "Mayday, Mayday," he intoned, repeating his name, rank, and last known coordinates. Static was his only reply. He resolved to keep trying intermittently, though the planet's bizarre energy fields might be scrambling his signals. As he trudged forward, every gust of wind felt like a malevolent spirit trying to drive him back. But Rowan was no stranger to desperate circumstances. When he'd enlisted in the Galactic Survey Force, he'd been told that frontiers were for the fearless and the stubborn. Since he lacked the unflinching stoicism of some of his peers, he figured stubbornness would have to do. His visor flagged a faint thermal reading about 2 kilometers ahead, possibly a rocky outcropping that could provide some respite from the gale. Gritting his teeth, Rowan angled his trek in that direction. Every so often, he thought he caught movement out of the corner of his eye, a flash of something orange or copper that disappeared the moment he whipped around. Could be local fauna, or maybe just illusions cast by swirling snow. Yet the longer he walked, the more he felt a presence, something watching from the shadows. He clutched the pulse rifle more tightly, scanning the environment with heightened vigilance. In the lonely whiteness, even illusions could lead a desperate explorer astray. On this particular day, however, the illusions were very real. There was indeed someone watching him, and that someone was about to change his life and the fate of 2 civilizations forever. The figure appeared like a wraith from the storm. One second, Rowan saw only swirling snow, and the next, an imposing silhouette stood against the white gusts, easily a head taller than him. No more. His heart lurched. The shape moved forward with lithe, predatory grace, revealing itself to be a towering alien woman, at least 8 feet in height. Her skin was the color of desert sunsets, a deep ochre that seemed almost luminous against the icy backdrop. A series of overlapping, scale-like plates adorned her body, reminiscent of organic armor. In one hand, she wielded a strange hybrid of a spear and a high-tech weapon, its shaft etched with iridescent runes that flickered in the dim light. Rowan lifted his pulse rifle reflexively, though he pointed it just slightly off target. An uneasy standoff formed in the silence, broken only by the howling wind. Through his suit's external speakers, he tried to speak calmly. "Identify yourself," he said, though he doubted she'd understand Terran Standard. To his astonishment, the woman's eyes, deep gold with vertical pupils, narrowed, and when she responded, he heard her voice through a translator built into his helmet. The device picked up enough linguistic data from her speech patterns to create a halting but intelligible version of her words. "You trespass upon the domain of the Vishari Empire, human. Surrender or be struck down." He blinked behind his visor. Vishari. That was new. The Galactic Survey Force had extensive logs on various interstellar species, but the name rang no bells. Still, he'd encountered enough first contact scenarios to guess that proclaiming ignorance of their territory rarely helped. Commander Rowan Reed of the Galactic Survey Force, he managed, trying to keep his voice cordial. I'm stranded here due to her head to a crash. I didn't mean to trespass. She regarded him icily, and though her expression was alien, he could see flashes of fierce pride and curiosity in her gaze. Through the translator, she retorted, You speak as though this is a misunderstanding. Your presence itself could be an act of espionage. The Emperor, she paused, then corrected herself. I must decide your fate, for I am Empress Zarina of the Vishari, and this world is under my protection. His pulse quickened. Not just any soldier then, he had stumbled right into the crosshairs of an empress. Typically, humans spent months on diplomatic niceties before getting an audience with another empire's monarch. Rowan had skipped straight to the top, literally. Despite the precariousness of the situation, he couldn't help but marvel at her regal bearing, the way she balanced raw power with an almost feline elegance. She moved with the quiet confidence of someone who had never known fear. Look, he said, lowering his rifle, I realize how this might look. But right now, all I want is to survive. Do you have a base or an outpost nearby? The storm raged around them, picking up fervor as if to emphasize the urgency. Zarina's gaze flicked from his rifle to his battered suit, then to the swirling snow. At last, she sighed. Our outpost is not far, she replied, almost reluctantly. You will come with me. But understand this, human. You are mine to command until we learn the extent of your intentions. Empress Zarina turned and strode away, each step surprisingly effortless in the deep snow. Rowan fell in behind her, half tripping in the drift as he tried to keep pace. He noticed that her towering form seemed to emit far more body heat than any human, perhaps a result of Vishari physiology that was adapted to these punishing climates. Regardless, the presence of another living being, especially one with some claim to authority, was enough to instill a faint flicker of hope. If she truly had shelter, then maybe he could avoid freezing to death. They trudged in silence for several minutes, the storm intensifying. Eventually they reached what appeared to be a sheer rock wall at the base of a mountain. Zarina pressed a hand against a hidden panel, and with a hiss of hydraulics, a concealed doorway slid open, revealing a dimly lit corridor beyond. In, she commanded curtly, stepping aside to let Rowan pass. He eased his rifle's safety on and ducked into the corridor, boots clacking against a metallic floor. Inside, the stale air was a shocking contrast to the swirling ice outside. Panels along the walls glowed with a dull orange luminescence, offering just enough light to make out the corridor's angular design. Lots of sharp lines and symmetrical patterns, a hallmark of advanced engineering. He paused, scanning the area. The outpost was clearly built for a species taller than humans. Everything was scaled up. The ceilings were high, the doorways broad, and even the furniture he glimpsed in branching rooms stood at a lofty height. Empress Zarina followed close behind, sealing the door with another pass of her hand. You will remove your helmet, she said. I want to see you clearly. Rowan hesitated, uncertain if the air composition was safe. But his suit's sensors had already tested it, indicating a close match to human oxygen-nitrogen standards, with only minor trace gases. Reluctantly, he unlatched the helmet and lifted it off. Cool, recycled air caressed his face. Zarina's eyes roamed across his features, her expression inscrutable. So this is what a human truly looks like without the tinted visor, she said, her translator capturing the faintest note of intrigue. Rowan shrugged. We're not that remarkable compared to some of the species out there. She gave a small scoff, pointing to a side chamber. Wait in there, I have to assess this facility's condition. It seems our power grid has suffered from the recent seismic activity. He raised an eyebrow. Seismic activity? But the storm? She interrupted him with a curt gesture. Do as you're told. You will have your answers soon enough. Inside the side chamber, which looked like a storage or briefing room, Rowan found a battered console that still flickered with faint life. He fiddled with the alien controls, trying to glean any information. Map data, power readings, or possibly a comlink frequency. The text was in a script his suit's translator had barely begun to parse, but he recognized a repeating symbol that probably signified low power or critical system. The walls subtly trembled underfoot, suggesting that the mountain above wasn't entirely stable. He wondered if the storm outside had triggered an avalanche or caused structural damage. When Zarina returned, her brow creased with worry. She had swapped her spear weapon for a compact sidearm that looked no less lethal. "The communications array is damaged," she announced. "We are sealed in, and the auxiliary generator is failing. We'll have only residual power to maintain life support." Rowan frowned. "Isn't there a backup site or something?" She shot him a glare that said she didn't appreciate him questioning her empire's engineering. "We have minimal rations. The next outpost is a day's travel away under ideal conditions. With the storm at full force, that journey is nearly impossible." Pausing, she set the sidearm aside. "I hope, Commander Rowan, that you humans are as resourceful as the rumors say." Before he could respond, a deep rumble shook the floor, sending dust and small bits of debris tumbling from the ceiling. The emergency lights in the chamber flickered ominously. Zarina's luminous eyes darted around, her posture rigid. "We must find a more stable section of this structure," she said. Her voice carried an edge of command, and Rowan suspected a hint of worry she tried to hide. "If the overhead rock collapses, we'll be entombed." Rowan instinctively put his helmet back on and snapped the seals. If the structural integrity gave out, exposure to vacuum or toxic gases could be the least of their worries. "Lead the way, Empress," he offered, letting a bit of his natural sarcasm bleed through. She gave him a sidelong glance, but didn't object. Together they moved through the corridors, stepping around cracks that veined the walls. The flicker of the overhead lights cast dancing shadows, lending every corner a menacing shape. Despite the precarious conditions, Rowan's mind kept drifting to the bizarre fact that he was walking alongside a newly discovered alien ruler. In typical circumstances, an entire GSF delegation would handle first contact with an Empire's monarch. He was a single pilot with a pulse rifle, an environment suit, and a set of questionable negotiation skills. As they ventured deeper, they passed multiple doorways that had collapsed entirely. Others led to labs or storerooms that were half filled with ice. Occasional arcs of electricity spat from broken conduits. The entire facility seemed on the verge of crumbling. Finally, they reached what must have once been a central command hub. A large console, shaped like a hexagon, stood in the center of the circular room. Overhead, a transparent dome, now cracked, offered a distorted view of swirling snow. The place reminded Rowan of an old planetary research station, the type he'd seen in the GSF archives, designed for analyzing harsh environments. Zarina approached the central console, tapping a sequence of glowing glyphs. An orange holographic display flickered to life, revealing multiple readouts in a language Rowan still couldn't decipher fully. Through his translator, he picked up a few terms: integrity, temperature, warning, collapse. None of them spelled good news. Zarina cursed under her breath in her own language, and Rowan's translator sputtered trying to find an equivalent expression. "Structural breach is imminent," she murmured. "We need to move to a lower level. We have about an hour before we risk a full collapse." An ominous rumbling, closer this time, seemed to affirm her warning. Metal screeched somewhere in the distance, followed by a shower of sparks raining down from the corridor behind them. Rowan felt his stomach clench. He'd survived the crash, only to end up in a crumbling outpost with an alien monarch who barely trusted him. "Lead the way," he repeated, more subdued this time. Zarina nodded, but before they could depart, another quake hit, this time strong enough to buckle the floor plates. The console shattered in a spray of sparks, and the dome overhead cracked further, sending shards of near-frozen glass cascading down. Rowan lunged sideways, grabbing Zarina's arm to pull her clear of the falling debris. She tensed, obviously not used to being manhandled, but allowed him to guide her away from the danger. They steadied themselves against a support beam. "Run," Zarina ordered, eyes wide with urgency. Together they sprinted into the corridor, ignoring the fact that half of it was starting to sag. The facility roared in protest, as if the mountain had decided to swallow it. A series of small explosions reverberated through the passageways. Overloaded conduits, Rowan guessed. Smoke and sparks turned the corridor into a chaotic storm of metal fragments. Had he known the day would end like this, he might have considered calling in sick. But ironically, the day's surprises weren't even close to finished. They managed to escape the worst of the collapse by racing down a maintenance shaft that angled deeper into the mountain. Faint emergency lights revealed a narrow passageway where Rowan had to hunch. despite it being meant for the taller Vishari, because the ceiling hung precariously low. The path twisted around a labyrinth of pipes and cables, some of which sputtered with broken circuits. Under other circumstances, Rowan might have considered the environment downright claustrophobic, but desperation made him focus. One more quake, and they might be flattened. At the end of the shaft, they emerged into a sublevel that was more stable, though not by much. The walls were lined with metal beams that groaned under the strain of shifting rock. A single heavy hatch stood in front of them, emergency lights flickering overhead. Zarina slammed a palm against the hatch's control panel, but it remained locked. Another deep rumble shook the area. Rowan joined her, using his suit's servo-assisted strength to help pry the hatch open. With a tortured squeal, the door relented. Beyond it, a short tunnel led to what appeared to be a reinforced storeroom with minimal equipment. The door sealed shut behind them, and silence fell, almost eerie after the cacophony of collapsing corridors. Rowan exhaled, sliding down against a wall to catch his breath. His pulse still hammered in his ears, and his muscles ached. But he was alive, and so was Zarina. She leaned against a console, chest heaving, her regal composure somewhat frayed. "We can't stay here," she said after a moment. "The structure above is too unstable. If a major section collapses, it might seal this entire mountain." Rowan scanned the storeroom. There were crates, probably containing rations or equipment, all with Vishari script. "What do you propose, Empress?" he asked, his voice rasping with fatigue. "That we try our luck outside in the storm again?" She looked at him with a complex expression, equal parts frustration, calculation, and grudging respect. "We must consider our options carefully," she said. "Freezing to death in the storm is foolish, but waiting here for the roof to crash down is equally unwise." He rose to his feet, forcing down the tremor in his legs. "My suit's picking up another large cavern about 500 meters north. Natural formation, maybe. If we can reach it, we'll have some measure of shelter. We might even find a path back to the surface that isn't blocked." Zarina's eyes flickered. "You can detect that?" She sounded intrigued. "We humans have some decent tech," he said, though he didn't elaborate that it was mostly the specialized sensors in his environment suit. "It's not perfect, but it might give us a path forward." She nodded curtly, then paused as if collecting her thoughts. In the dim emergency lighting, her features looked sharper, more defined, and he couldn't help but notice her commanding presence. A small part of his mind found her strikingly beautiful, albeit in an otherworldly way. But then the building groaned again, and a fresh crack snaked across the ceiling. There was no time to dwell on such thoughts. They had to move. "We'll take the supplies we can carry," she said, "and head for this cavern. Whatever awaits us there, it can't be worse than what we leave behind." Rowan grunted in agreement. "Let's hope you're right." They gathered what meager supplies they could find: thermal blankets, protein packs, which Rowan hoped were edible for humans, and a single portable power cell that still held a flicker of charge. As they retraced their steps to the hatch, new cracks marred the corridor, and the floor visibly sagged in places. By the time they reached the maintenance shaft, half of it had caved in. Their only option was to navigate a narrower bypass, practically crawling over rubble and twisting cables. Rowan led the way, shining a beam of light from his helmet across the gloom, while Zarina followed, her movements graceful despite the cramped space. Occasionally she stumbled, prompting Rowan to lend a steadying hand. Each time she would bristle at the assistance, her pride clearly wounded at needing help from a human. Yet she never pulled away violently, as if she recognized the necessity of cooperation. When they finally reached a point to exit the outpost's subterranean passages, Rowan used his suit to hack a sealed bulkhead. The internal sensors indicated minimal oxygen on the other side. Sure enough, when they forced the door open, they emerged into a dark, open chamber where the walls were half composed of raw ice. The swirling wind outside was still audible but muted. A faint opening in the far wall hinted at a passage leading deeper into the mountain. No sooner had they stepped inside than the ceiling above them let out a resounding crack. Rowan swore, diving forward to tackle Zarina out of the path of falling debris. A cascade of icy rubble crashed down with thunderous force, nearly burying the corridor behind them. Dust and ice crystals filled the air, making it hard to see. Coughing, Rowan realized he'd pinned Zarina against the ground in an entirely undignified position, his helmet pressed near her face. She pushed him off with surprising strength, lips curled in annoyance. Yet there was a flicker of some other emotion in her glowing eyes. Relief, maybe, or curiosity. Panting, they scrambled to their feet. The exit to the outside world was blocked by a wall of ice and stone. The only path was the natural cavern, continuing deeper under the mountain. "We can't go back," Rowan said, surveying the collapsed section. "Then forward it is," Zarina replied, regaining her regal bearing with practiced ease. They trudged onward, guided by his suit's diminishing sensor feed. The temperature dropped with every step, enough that even Zarina's inherent warmth seemed taxed. Rowan's breath fogged the visor of his helmet, and the dim lighting cast their shadows against the frozen walls. Finally, they reached a wider chamber that opened into a rough-hewn tunnel sloping upward. The walls glittered with crystalline formations that refracted the feeble light into a faint rainbow. In the far corner, a small pocket of rocky ground looked relatively flat and dry. Rowan, exhausted, slid onto a boulder, removing his helmet to take a few steadying breaths in the chilled air. Empress Zarina stood a few feet away, arms folded. "We are trapped, but alive," she remarked. "And you, Commander Rowan, have risked your life to save mine more than once. For that, I commend your bravery or your foolishness." He gave a tired chuckle. "In my experience, the line between bravery and foolishness is thin." Silence settled. There, in the heart of a freezing mountain, a strange intimacy blossomed. The crisis had torn away the formalities, forcing them to rely on each other for survival. And there was something electric in the air, perhaps simple adrenaline, perhaps some deeper, unspoken connection. Zarina's gaze lingered on him longer than before, her posture less guarded. Rowan found himself moving closer, his body still thrumming with leftover tension. She stood unmoving, watching him, her vertical pupils flickering with subdued light. In a hushed voice, she spoke. "The Vishari never believed in alliances with lesser races, and the concept of mating outside our lineage is scorned. I once laughed at the idea that a human could ever be worthy of us." She hesitated. "But my empire values strength, adaptability, and resourcefulness." Rowan's heart pounded in his chest. The flickering reflections off the ice gave her features an almost ethereal glow. He wondered briefly if this was madness, the product of stress, fear, and swirling hormones. But he didn't draw back. When he finally spoke, his voice was hoarse. "Maybe," he said, "we have more in common than either of us realized." Even as the mountain groaned above them and the bitter wind whispered through unseen cracks, they found themselves caught in a gravitational pull. Neither wanted to fight. And in that moment, neither could have possibly foreseen how drastically a single fateful union would reshape the destiny of two races. Warmth spread through the small cavern, utterly incongruous with the frigid world beyond. Commander Rowan Reed lay beside Empress Zarina on a makeshift bed fashioned from thermal blankets and spare gear, still half disbelieving that they'd actually found comfort in each other amid the crumbling outpost. The howling wind outside seemed a distant roar, far less threatening now that they'd found this protected niche. His environment suit lay discarded nearby, while hers, scaled armor and integrated bioweave, remained partly in place, as if the proud alien ruler couldn't fully let go of her guard. Yet in this quiet interval, she was neither cold nor aloof. In fact, as she propped herself on an elbow to study him, her golden eyes radiated curiosity. "I still find it strange," she murmured in her resonant voice, "how quickly events unfolded. I never intended to trust you, let alone—" She broke off, face coloring a deeper hue of sunset orange. Rowan found himself smiling, enthralled by her candid admission. "It's a crisis," he said quietly. "Sometimes adversity forces you to see people in a new light. And sometimes, well, we do crazy things." Her lips curved in a half-smile. In the Vishari Empire, such intimacy with an outsider is considered scandalous. There would be calls for my abdication if anyone knew. She trailed a fingertip along his collarbone, as if contemplating the risk she'd taken by choosing closeness over caution. The irony, of course, was that if they didn't escape the cavern, the Empire's judgments wouldn't matter much. Nature would decide their fate for them. The moment Tender as it was, ended with a new rumble from deep within the mountain. Dust sifted down in a lazy sprinkle, making them both tense. Zarina's gaze flicked toward the ceiling. "This place won't last forever," she said. "The planet's tectonic instabilities, combined with the storm's fury, could trigger further collapses." Rowan eased himself to his feet, ignoring a dull ache in his right shoulder. "Then we better figure out a plan. Our best bet might be to find a route back to open air on the mountain's far side." She rose too, stretching her long limbs. It struck him again how imposing she was, 8 feet of lithe muscle and commanding presence. Yet the brief vulnerability he'd witnessed made her feel less unreachable. He reached for his pulse rifle, securing it over one shoulder while Zarina fastened her sidearm at her hip. Together they made their way deeper into the cave system, which gradually sloped upward. Their flashlights revealed walls glittering with crystalline formations, rivulets of meltwater weaving across the rocky floor. It was beautiful in a stark, alien way. At times, the passage narrowed so much that Rowan had to squeeze sideways, while Zarina crouched beneath the jagged ceiling. In one particularly tight section, she stumbled, prompting him to catch her hand. She fixed him with a guarded expression, but her fingers intertwined with his for just a heartbeat before she pulled away. They continued until the corridor widened again, revealing a vaulted chamber. Water dripped from icicles that clung to the ceiling, forming a small pool on the cave floor. Rowan's visor beeped an alert, something about anomalous energy readings. He scanned the area, perplexed. "There's a faint field here," he noted, "similar to the one that knocked out my shuttle. Might be a natural phenomenon." Zarina's face tightened, as though she recognized something. The Empire's first explorers called such places convergence sites. The storms are especially fierce where these energies pool. She glanced toward him. "We must proceed carefully. Any large burst of energy could bring the tunnel down on us." The deeper they went, the more Rowan's suit alerted him to unusual biological and electromagnetic readings. He tried to piece together the data, but the suit's system had taken a beating since the crash, and diagnostic errors kept popping up. All the while, Zarina occasionally put a hand to her abdomen, an action that caught Rowan's eye. "You all right?" he asked, noticing a faint tremor in her posture. She hesitated, then waved him off. "Just residual tension," she said. "Vishari physiology runs hotter than humans. Prolonged stress can cause fluctuations." She said it almost dismissively, but he didn't miss the flash of uncertainty in her gaze. They emerged into a new section of the cavern that felt more stable. No ominous rumbles, and the air was slightly warmer. Natural light seeped in through a fissure high in the rock ceiling, revealing a frozen waterfall at the far end. A trickle of water still flowed beneath the ice. Rowan found a dry ledge to set down their packs. "Let's rest," he proposed. Zarina, normally so stoic, nodded without argument. As they settled, Rowan fiddled with a portable device from his survival kit, a small antenna meant for short-range signals. Maybe if luck was on their side, someone from the GSF or another group might be scanning these frequencies. But the display only spat static, confirming his suspicion that the planet's unique field scrambled all attempts at communication. He glanced over to find Zarina staring into empty space. A faint sweat coated her forehead despite the chill air. Concerned, he leaned closer. "Are you sure you're okay?" For a moment, she said nothing. Then her voice, unusually subdued, replied, "My body feels different. A swirling energy I cannot explain." She took a breath, pressing a palm to her chest as if trying to steady herself. "It's as though something is growing within me. This can't be right." Rowan's brows drew together. The original data suggested humans and Vishari were genetically incompatible. He'd read dozens of xenobiology notes to that effect. But the note in her voice made his pulse quicken in alarm. "Could it be? Do you mind if I run a scan?" he asked gently. Zarina hesitated, pride warring with concern, then nodded. Activating the suit's med scanner, he directed it toward her torso. It emitted a faint hum, and after a few seconds, spat out a display of incomprehensible readouts. Vital signs, hormone levels, things that looked off the charts. "This is wild," Rowan muttered, reconfiguring the scan in a more universal standard. When the data finally translated, his jaw dropped. "It's registering embryonic development. The scan reads that you're—" He caught himself, uncertain how to say it. Zarina's eyes widened, her face darkening in alarm, or maybe shock. "That I'm pregnant," she finished, her voice equal parts incredulity and an undercurrent of awe. He let out a stunned breath. Pregnant, with a hybrid child. Neither spoke for a beat, the only sound being dripping water echoing against the cavern walls. Their earlier intimate encounter had been so recent it hardly seemed possible for signs to manifest this quickly. Yet the reading was unmistakable. "I, this is impossible," Zarina said, golden eyes darting from Rowan to the scanner. "Vishari biology shouldn't merge with human DNA. It defies everything we know." Her tone was laced with confusion and no small amount of fear. Rowan recognized her turmoil and reached out, resting a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "It defies what we believed, but apparently nature has other ideas." He drew in a calming breath as if that might slow his own racing thoughts. "Are you all right? Do you feel any pain?" Her gaze flickered, and for the first time he saw genuine vulnerability in the imposing empress. "No, just an intense heat, an energy. It's as if my body's systems are shifting to accommodate something entirely new." The admission seemed to sap her composure. She fell silent, pressing a palm to her abdomen again. On some level, Rowan's own mind reeled with the implications. A child, a living bridge between two species who, as far as he knew, had never even met until now. The ramifications for both the Vishari Empire and humanity were staggering, not to mention the personal consequences for Zarina. Scandal, potential political upheaval, or worse. He recalled her earlier words about abdication. Could a pregnant empress even hold the throne if the child's father was an outsider? And how would his own people react if they found out? Suddenly, every life and death challenge he'd faced so far seemed tame by comparison. "Rowan?" Zarina spoke his name in a quieter tone, drawing him back to the present. "We must decide our next steps carefully. My empire, there are factions that will see this as an abomination. My bloodline is supposed to be pure, unbroken for generations. To them, I've not just broken tradition, I've committed treason against our most sacred laws." She paused, swallowing. "It would mean a civil crisis at best, open war at worst." He exhaled slowly, trying to maintain calm. "I won't let anything happen to you. Or to—" He found himself unable to say "our child" out loud, not because he didn't believe it, but because it was so colossal in meaning. She studied him, perhaps noting the sincerity in his voice. The flickering light cast her features in stark relief, highlighting the determined set of her jaw. "Humans are known for their boundless audacity," she said, and for the first time a true, unguarded smile touched her lips. "Maybe that's what we need right now." Another tremor rumbled through the cavern. Overhead, tiny chunks of ice rattled and fell. Zarina regained her feet, though she moved more cautiously, as if more aware of her body's changes. "We need to find a route outside. Whatever happens next, we can't be trapped here." She gestured for him to follow as she ducked through a narrow archway that sloped upward, partially blocked by a fallen boulder. They pushed through in tense silence, each preoccupied with swirling thoughts. It was eerie how the corridors of ice had grown quieter, as if the planet itself held its breath. After another 15 minutes of careful climbing, they reached an opening. Ragged sunlight spilled in, and Rowan's visor indicated that they were near the surface. Cool air blasted them as they emerged onto a ledge high on the mountainside. Below them stretched a chaotic vista, the outpost far beneath layers of rubble, and beyond it, swirling snowdrifts and jagged rock spires. The storm had not abated. It raged, but they had at least a vantage point to plan an escape. Zarina craned her head, scanning the horizon. "There," she said, pointing with a gauntleted hand. Rowan squinted. Through the shifting veil of snow, he saw what looked like a sleek Vishari aircraft approaching, accompanied by bright flashes of plasma fire. His heart lurched. "Friends of yours?" he asked warily. She grimaced. "It could be the Imperial Guard, or it could be one of my rivals. We can't know until they land." Rowan checked his pulse rifle, ensuring it still had a charge. "Let's hope they come in peace." But he knew from her expression that hope might be in short supply. A thunderous quake rattled the ledge, forcing them to cling to the icy wall for balance. Something in the distance, perhaps a chunk of cliff, tumbled away in a landslide of white powder and black stone. The approaching craft circled once, beams of light crisscrossing the air, then descended toward the plateau below. From their elevated vantage, Rowan and Zarina watched as a contingent of tall, armored figures disembarked. Their gear glinted in the weak sunlight, each soldier's attire bearing insignias Rowan didn't recognize. They moved with disciplined precision, fanning out to secure a perimeter. One of them carried a scanning device, sweeping it in broad arcs. Zarina inhaled sharply. "That crest," she said, voice tight. "It belongs to High Warlord Klyer, one of my most zealous military officers. He's a staunch believer in Vishari purity. If he's here, it's not just a rescue mission. He'll be looking for answers about the outpost failure and my disappearance." Her gaze flicked to Rowan's weapon, then to his face. "We must be cautious. If they find you, they may try to execute you on sight." Rowan didn't doubt it, recalling her warnings that some factions would view him as a polluting influence. "Then let's stay hidden until we know more." They crawled down a narrow path that wound between ice columns and jagged rocks, staying out of the direct line of sight. The wind and snow worked in their favor, obscuring them from casual observation. Once they got within earshot, Rowan could make out the low chatter of voices. His suit's translator started to parse the language. Words like empress, location, and traitor bubbled through the feed. Tensing, he glanced at Zarina. Her jaw clenched. "He's convinced I must have been abducted or corrupted," she muttered. "Klyer has always plotted to expand his influence at court. This could be the perfect chance for him to seize power if he deems me unfit to rule." An acrid dread settled in Rowan's stomach. He'd gone from a simple crash survivor to a major complication in an imperial power struggle. Perhaps he should have seen this coming the moment he realized he was alone with an alien empress in a collapsing outpost. Carefully, they edged closer to the group. Through a gap in the ice, Rowan could see a heavily armored warrior who stood a head taller than even Zarina, a monumental figure in gilded plating etched with swirling symbols. He carried a halberd-like weapon, crackling with energy. There was no mistaking that this was High Warlord Clear. A soldier barked something, raising an arm to indicate something on a handheld scanner. The entire squad turned abruptly, heading for a slope not far from where Rowan and Zarina crouched. Zarina pulled Rowan back, pressing her body against his to keep them hidden behind a jutting rock. Her warmth, far greater than a human's, radiated through her armor. He tried not to think about the child, their child, growing inside her, or what that would mean if Claire discovered them. "I have an idea," Zarina whispered, leaning close enough that he could feel her breath against his ear. "We need to separate. I'll draw them away, let them find me alone. Then you can slip around to the far side of the landing craft and hide there. Once they evacuate me, you might be able to snag a ride off planet or signal for your own people." Rowan bristled. "Leave you behind? Not a chance." She gripped his shoulder, and her expression flashed with fierce resolve. "Listen, they won't kill me. I'm still Empress by blood, and my disappearance has caused enough uproar. But if they see you, they'll know something unprecedented happened. They'll question me and possibly do something catastrophic to both of us." Her gaze dropped momentarily to her abdomen. "This child needs time for me to figure out how to protect it, how to protect you. Please, Rowan, trust me on this." He wanted to argue, to proclaim that he'd stand by her no matter what, but the raw urgency in her eyes made him swallow his protest. She was right. The best chance of safeguarding their impossible secret might be to ensure the Empire's suspicious warriors never laid eyes on him. At least, not yet. Steeling himself, Rowan nodded. "Fine, but I'm not abandoning you permanently. We'll find a way to reconnect." Relief flickered across her features. "You have my word. I'm not about to let the father of my child get lost in the cosmos." She carefully removed an ornate pendant from around her neck, a small crystal that glowed with faint, swirling light. "This is a Vishari life ward. It's keyed to my personal biosignature. Keep it close. I can use it to track you, and it may help you navigate certain Empire-coded systems if the opportunity arises." Rowan accepted the pendant, noticing a mild warmth in his palm. It felt almost alive. "I'll keep it safe," he said quietly. Their parting was swift, out of necessity. Zarina kissed him with a fervor that tasted like resolve and unspoken longing. Then she rose, stepping out from their hiding place with the regal poise of the empress she was. The moment the soldiers spotted her, they rushed forward in alarm. Rowan couldn't understand much from the shouts, but the translator picked up phrases like, "Empress, we feared the worst," and "Are you injured?" Zarina responded in firm, clipped tones, deflecting them from noticing the patch of ground where Rowan crouched, hidden behind an icy boulder. As the group closed around her, High Warlord Clear knelt in a show of respect, though Rowan suspected it was laced with self-serving motive. In the swirl of conversation, Clear's deep baritone rose, questioning how she had survived the cataclysm that destroyed the outpost. She offered a plausible explanation. She'd been forced to shelter in the caves, alone relying on her cunning to endure. When they pressed her for details, had she encountered any humans or anomalies? She declared she'd seen only the remains of a crashed human craft, with no survivors in sight. Rowan watched from his hiding spot, adrenaline pounding in his veins. Each second stretched. He noticed how occasionally Zarina's eyes darted toward him, just barely, as if to ensure he hadn't blundered into view. At last, Clyer gestured for her to accompany them back to the aircraft. She agreed, though Rowan could tell from her body language that it strained her not to glance back in his direction. A gust of wind and snow swirled around the group, partially obscuring them from Rowan's view as they trudged toward the plateau. Hard hammering, Rowan crept closer, crouched low. He could see the craft's landing ramp lowering. Clear and the other soldiers escorted Zarina inside, leaving a pair of guards to stand sentry. Once she was aboard, the engines fired up, kicking plumes of ice crystals into the air. The entire vessel lifted slowly, powering for the sky. Rowan hunkered down, raising an arm to shield himself from the stinging hail that followed in its wake. When he finally looked up, the skies were empty. The craft was gone, and with it, Zarina. For a long moment, Rowan felt hollow. Now he was truly alone on this godforsaken rock. Yet beneath the chill, a spark of determination caught hold. He still held the glowing pendant. He had a reason to survive, not just for himself, but for the woman and unborn child who counted on him to find a way forward. "All right," he muttered, slipping the pendant into a compartment on his suit. "Time to get off this world and figure out how to crash an empire's prejudice." With the Vishari search party gone, Rowan had a window of opportunity to escape the planet's savage conditions. But how? His own shuttle lay in pieces. The outpost's secondary craft, if one existed, was likely buried under rubble. Perhaps there were other human explorers in the system who had established a colony or a forward base. The GSF had been known to plant small research stations on uncharted worlds, especially near anomalies like the one that disrupted his ship. If he could locate such a station, maybe he'd find help. The question was, which direction should he travel? The planet's swirling storms made sensor use sporadic. He took a moment to recalibrate his suit. The device indicated faint signals to the south, nothing strong enough to identify but possibly a power source or comm beacon. It was better than wandering aimlessly. Securing his rifle, he started the long descent from the mountainous region, crossing treacherous ice fields and snaking around crevasses that yawned like hungry mouths. Twice he nearly lost his footing on slick patches. Each time the memory of Zarina's determined gaze pulled him back to caution. As he traveled, he occasionally tried the short-range transmitter, sending out a general distress call. Static was the only reply. The hours bled together until he finally spotted an unnatural structure rising against the horizon, a cluster of prefabricated modules perched on a rocky plateau. The sight filled his chest with relief. A GSF outpost? A private mining base? He had no way of knowing, but it was obviously constructed by humans, or a human-friendly race, judging by the geometry of the buildings and the standard reinforcement struts. When he drew closer, floodlights snapped on, illuminating a perimeter fence and automated turrets that locked onto him. Rowan froze, arms raised in a gesture of surrender. After a tense pause, a garbled voice crackled over loudspeakers. "Identify yourself, or we will engage." He thumbed his suit's external mic. "Commander Rowan Reed, Galactic Survey Force. My shuttle crashed about 3 days back, requesting shelter and comm access." Another pause, then the turrets powered down. "Approach the gate slowly," the voice replied. Once inside, Rowan saw that the settlement was small, maybe 50 or 60 personnel. The main building bore the insignia of a mercantile guild affiliated with GSF operations. An armed guard escorted him to a decontamination chamber, then to a cramped command station. There, behind a desk strewn with data tablets, sat a lean, middle-aged officer with a scar over one eyebrow. "I'm Captain Raina Harding," she introduced. "We detected the crash, but the storms made any rescue impossible. You're lucky to be alive." Rowan nodded, exhaustion weighing on him like a lead blanket. "I ran into complications, and I need to get a message off-world as soon as possible." Harding scrutinized him with a practiced gaze. "We have a long-range transmitter, but the storms play havoc with it. You might be stuck here a while." She motioned for him to have a seat. "Meanwhile, we're ramping up security. Word is the Vishari Empire is on edge about something. Rumors say their empress vanished on a remote mission. Some suspect foul play by outside forces." He struggled to hide his reaction. "Any official word from GSF High Command?" Harding shook her head. "Just that tensions between humans and Vishari might be escalating. We got a brief communique urging outposts to fortify in case the Empire decides to blame us for something." Rowan's chest tightened. So the larger galaxy had already caught wind of Zarina's disappearance. The seeds of conflict were being sown. If the Empire publicly declared she'd been compromised by a human, the outcome might be war on a massive scale. That evening, Rowan found himself assigned a bunk in the outpost's cramped barracks. The settlement was abuzz with speculation about the Vishari and the possibility of an imminent attack. Engineers toiled day and night, reinforcing walls, testing perimeter drones, and stockpiling munitions. Harding's intention was clear. If the Empire came knocking, they wouldn't find an easy conquest. Rowan aided where he could, helping to rig up additional sensors for early detection. At the same time, he tried to keep an ear to the ground for any new intel on Zarina. 4 days passed in a tense limbo. The storms never fully let up, making communication with orbit sporadic at best. During fleeting breaks in the interference, Harding attempted to hail other GSF ships or any allies in the vicinity. Sometimes they caught snippets of chatter, references to mass mobilizations in Vishari territory, or rumors that the Empress might have reemerged, though no one could confirm the details. Whenever Rowan heard scraps of rumor, his heart leapt. Had Zarina managed to preserve her secret? Was she under house arrest or forced to quell suspicion? On the 5th day, the settlement's klaxons roared to life in the early morning hours. Rowan bolted upright, grabbing his pulse rifle, fear jolting him awake. Over the intercom, Harding's voice cut through the barracks. "All hands, gear up. We've got unidentified ships entering the atmosphere." Men and women scrambled into armor, rifles slung over shoulders. Rowan rushed to the command station, visor snapping down over his face. The outer monitors showed swirling snow parted by bright searchlights. 3 large ships descended, sleek hulls bearing the unmistakable lines of Vishari design. "Damn it," Harding cursed under her breath. "They're making a bold move this far out." Rowan's heart hammered. Was Zarina aboard one of those vessels? Or was this an entirely different faction seeking payback for her disappearance? Before he could speculate, a booming voice came over the outpost loudspeakers in heavily accented standard. "People of the human settlement, we come under flag of negotiation. Lower your defenses and allow us entry." Harding snorted. "Likely story," she muttered, exchanging a glance with Rowan. Over the open channel, she responded, "Identify yourselves and your purpose." A tense pause. Then the same voice replied, "This is Lord Oryx of the Vishari Imperial Council. We carry a message from our Empress." Rowan nearly dropped his rifle. Oryx was a name he'd heard Zarina mention, a moderate member of her advisory council, not a fanatic like Clear. He might be here in good faith. Harding gave Rowan a sidelong look. "Looks like you might get that talk with the Empress you were hoping for, but let's stay on our guard." She activated the outpost's external broadcast. "All right, Lord Oryx, you can land outside our perimeter. We'll talk in the open. If you try anything hostile, our defenses will respond." Outside, the 3 ships settled onto the snow with graceful precision. Engines hissed and powered down. When the ramp lowered, a squad of Vishari warriors stepped out, each towering over the humans by at least a foot. At their head was a slender figure dressed in gilded armor, swirling motifs etched across the chest plate. Rowan couldn't tear his gaze away, wondering, was Zarina about to walk down that ramp and change everything forever? Rowan joined Captain Harding and several guards at the outpost's main gate, the icy wind buffeting them as they stepped outside. His pulse thumped in his ears, every neuron on high alert. Across the trampled snow lay three landed Vishari vessels. A cluster of tall, armored figures approached, led by Lord Oryx, lean, elegant, and draped in gilded finery that denoted high status within the Empire. Yet, at first glance, there was no sign of Zarina. Rowan's heart twisted with worry that perhaps she wasn't with them, or worse, that something had gone wrong. Oryx lifted an open palm, perhaps a gesture of non-aggression. Harding nodded in acknowledgement but didn't lower her rifle. Behind her, a ring of human guards stood at the ready, weapons primed. The wind carried the faint hum of shield generators from the outpost walls, and the tension in the air felt like a coiled spring. "Lord Oryx!" Harding called, raising her voice over the gale. "You said you come under a flag of negotiation. State your intentions." Oryx's deep-set eyes swept across the human defenders before settling on Harding. "I speak on behalf of Empress Zarina," he replied, the translator in Rowan's helmet clarifying his rich baritone. "We request safe passage for ourselves and our entourage into your settlement so that we might open discussions of mutual urgency." Harding's expression remained steely. "You'll forgive me if I hesitate to welcome armed forces into our base. We've been hearing rumors of your empire's mobilization." Oryx inclined his head. "Those rumors are not unfounded, Captain. The Empire is indeed gathering strength. There is unrest that threatens both our worlds." He paused, scanning the crowd until his gaze fixed on Rowan. Something like recognition sparked, and Oryx's eyes flicked momentarily to the small pendant chain visible near Rowan's collar. The Vishari Lord gave the slightest nod of greeting, which made Rowan's nerves jangle with anticipation. Clearly, Oryx was aware of his significance, but whether that was good news or bad news remained to be seen. Before Harding could reply, a new figure emerged from the middle of the formation. A tall, robed Vishari woman, her face partially hidden by a hood. The folds of her robe swished around her ankles, embroidered with swirling motifs. As she pushed back the hood, Rowan's breath caught. It was Zarina. She looked tired but composed, her fiery orange skin and regal bearing unmistakable. Her gaze slid past the gathered humans until it landed on Rowan. For a moment, neither spoke, but in that fraction of time, the tension in her eyes melted into relief. He felt an almost physical warmth in his chest, as if the crystal pendant reconnected them across the snow. "Empress," Harding said curtly, acknowledging Zarina's station. "Your presence is unexpected." Zarina lifted her chin. "I come in good faith to prevent a war that could devastate both our peoples. The Empire stands at a crossroads. Some among us believe humans have corrupted me, that I'm unfit to rule. Others believe this moment signals our evolution." Her golden eyes flicked to Rowan. "Either we find a peaceful resolution, or bloodshed is inevitable." Harding's shoulders eased minutely, though her guard remained up. "If you seek peace," she said, "we can at least talk. But weapons remain outside." She gestured for the Vishari contingent to relinquish their arms, a bold demand, given the disparity in size and power. Lord Oryx looked to Zarina for confirmation. She nodded, and the Vishari warriors unstrapped their pulse spears and sidearms, placing them on the snowy ground. Only then did Harding signal for the outpost gate to open. Row by row, the tall aliens filed in under the watchful eyes of human guards. Somewhere in that tense procession, Rowan found himself walking beside Zarina, the brief brush of her hand against his arm, a silent testament to how much had changed and how much was yet to come. They convened in the outpost's largest chamber, a repurposed hangar where supply crates had been shoved aside to make room for an improvised round table. Thick heating coils hummed, creating a warm island of air in the otherwise drafty space. Zarina and Lord Oryx took seats on one side, flanked by a pair of Vishari guards, who refused to stray far from their empress. Harding, Rowan, and a handful of key personnel occupied the other side. Between them lay a scattering of data tablets and star charts, each referencing the swirling tensions that now defined human Vishari relations. Zarina spoke first. To be clear, I am here without the blessing of certain factions within the Imperial Court. High Warlord Clear believes I am, she paused, choosing her words, compromised. He has gathered a coalition of zealots who see only one path to maintain what they call our genetic purity, the elimination of all outside influences and, regrettably, the destruction of any who oppose them. Harding's jaw tightened. And by outside influences, you mean humans, yes? Lord Oryx inclined his head. Regrettably so. If Clyre sways enough support to seize the capital, the Empire could mobilize a massive fleet against any human colony within striking distance. A murmur of concern rippled through the human side. The notion of a full-scale Vishari invasion was chilling, given the Empire's advanced technology and formidable warriors. Captain Harding laced her fingers together on the table. You mentioned the possibility of an alternative, a peaceful solution. But how do you plan to convince your people not to go to war? Zarina lifted her gaze, and Rowan felt the faint flicker of an otherworldly presence emanating from her. My hope, she said, lies in transparency. I have evidence that humans and Vishari are not just compatible in alliance, but genetically. Some will see this as an abomination, but others, perhaps many more, will see the promise of new strength. The question is whether we can keep the Empire from fracturing in the process. A hush fell as her words sank in. Aurora, the child's existence, was no mere rumor now. It was a critical bargaining chip, if introduced strategically. Yet revealing such a monumental secret came with lethal risks. Harding's gaze shifted to Rowan. I suspect you know more than you've shared with us, Commander. He cleared his throat, feeling everyone's eyes on him, including Zarina's. It's true, he said, choosing his words carefully. I can confirm that there is a unique situation. Empress Serena is expecting a child with a human father. Gasps and stunned expressions rippled through the gathered humans. Even those who had suspected something extraordinary could hardly fathom the implications. Zarina placed a hand lightly over her stomach, a subtle gesture, but one that carried profound weight. Lord Oryx spoke into the silence. Some in the Empire have already begun to whisper rumors of this. Clear's supporters call it an abomination. Others, more open-minded, see it as evolution, proof that the old xenophobic edicts no longer serve us. Harding blew out a breath, looking equal parts startled and impressed. This changes everything. Pausing, she rubbed her temples. But how do we stand a chance against Clear's potential fleet? Our best hope is to unify those who believe in peace before the others can strike. Zarina's voice rang with quiet conviction. That is why I risked coming here. I need human support. If the Empire senses that humans are not cowering in fear, if they see we stand together, the moderate factions may rally behind me. We can forestall bloodshed and guide both our peoples into a new era. The negotiations dragged on for hours, with both sides hashing out the logistics of forging an emergency alliance. Harding insisted that any formal accord must be ratified by higher levels of human governance. Lord Oryx countered that the Empress could provisionally bind certain Vishari fleets to a non-aggression pact, provided they recognized Zarina's legitimacy. The catch, however, was how to handle the looming threat posed by High Warlord Clear. He already commanded a sizable portion of the Imperial Navy, and his supporters were fanatical about maintaining Vishari purity. At the heart of every debate stood the reality of Zarina's pregnancy. Though the outpost leadership was stunned by the revelation, they couldn't deny the leverage it provided. As Rowan listened, a sense of awe settled on him. He recalled the first time he'd laid eyes on Zarina, an 8-foot alien queen in a frozen wasteland, haughty and untouchable. Now she was an unexpected ambassador of transformation, trying to avert a galactic war, and in her womb a child that defied centuries of evolutionary assumptions. Eventually the parties agreed on a plan. First, a formal signal would be broadcast, when the storm allowed, to all nearby human colonies, announcing an immediate summit to discuss the alliance. In tandem, Zarina and Oryx would contact moderate Vishari forces, urging them to gather at a neutral location. The aim, to present a united front so strong that Clear couldn't simply sweep it aside. But time was short. Reports suggested the High Warlord was already moving troops into critical systems. Any sign of weakness from Zarina would give him the perfect pretext to declare her rule illegitimate. When the initial accord was drafted, Harding rose from her seat, scanning the room. All right, folks, she announced. We have the outlines of an agreement, but we still have to hold this outpost. If Clyer decides to launch a surprise strike, we need to be ready. Let's get to work on reinforcing the perimeter and boosting comm range. Officers and techs saluted, then hurried off to their tasks. Oryx and the Vishari retinue departed for their ship to handle their own communications. That left Rowan and Zarina standing amid the slowly dispersing crowd in the hangar. She looked at him, and despite the public space, her eyes shone with a tenderness that caught his breath. "Walk with me," she murmured. He nodded, falling into step beside her as they navigated through the outpost corridors. People stared, no doubt hearing rumors of her pregnancy, but no one dared challenge the imposing empress. At last, they reached a smaller, quieter alcove near the back of the facility, a tech storage room cleared of crates. Zarina touched a panel to close the door behind them. The hush was palpable. Then, without preamble, she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him, resting her forehead against his. He slipped his hands gently to her waist, mindful of the child she carried. "I feared we wouldn't see each other again," she whispered. "When Clyer's forces took me back, there was an interrogation, suspicion. I had to claim that I'd hidden alone to survive the outpost collapse. Only Oryx guessed the truth, and he's taken enormous risks to help me." Her voice caught slightly. "Even now, my position is precarious. If we fail to rally enough support, it could mean a civil war that engulfs your people as well." Rowan leaned into her warmth, letting the tension in his muscles unwind. "We won't let that happen," he said quietly. "We've come too far to let prejudice tear everything down." They talked in hushed tones, exchanging details of what had transpired since they'd parted. Rowan recounted his trek south, stumbling upon Harding's outpost in the days of fortification. Zarina explained how Clear's men had brought her to the capital under the guise of concern, only for the warlord to mount a propaganda campaign. He painted her disappearance as a sign of the Empire's vulnerability. The rumor of a possible human involvement ignited xenophobic sentiments that had long simmered in the Empire's fringes. "If it weren't for Oryx and the moderate counselors," she said, "I might be in a cell rather than free to negotiate. But my station still holds weight for now." Rowan exhaled. "And the pregnancy? How have you been feeling?" He glanced at her midsection. Though her armor concealed most changes, he wondered if the child was growing at an accelerated pace, as some xenobiological hybrids were rumored to do. Zarina tilted her head, her expression thoughtful. "Physically, it's unlike any standard Vishari pregnancy. My body's core temperature has risen, and I sense fluctuations that even our medtech can't fully explain. But the child feels healthy, alive with energy. The doctors I trust are baffled, yet intrigued. They advise caution, which is one reason I'm determined to end these hostilities quickly. Stress and conflict do us no favors." They shared a moment of quiet awe, acknowledging the magnitude of what they'd created together. Then the door slid open with a soft hiss, and Lord Oryx poked his head inside. "Empress," he said, bowing lightly. "Apologies, but we must finalize the communication schedule if we're to broadcast the Alliance announcement during the next atmospheric lull." Zarina nodded, stepping back from Rowan. "Of course, I'm coming." She glanced one last time at Rowan, her eyes simmering with unspoken promise. "We will speak again soon." As Oryx and Zarina left, Rowan stood there in the stillness, his heart swirling with renewed determination. Their plan was audacious, relying on shaky truces and rushed diplomacy. Yet if they failed, the cost would be immeasurable. He collected his thoughts, then made his way to the outpost command center. Captain Harding was hunched over a console, checking sensor arrays. "Commander," she greeted, looking up. "How's the Empress holding up?" "Resolute," Rowan said simply. He studied Harding's exhausted features. "You look like you haven't slept in a few days." She rubbed her temples. "I haven't, really. The entire settlement is on edge. Some of the civilians worry we're opening the gates to potential invaders. Others fear the Empire is just a day away from dropping an armada on our heads." She sighed. "And now we learn about a half-human, half-Vishari child? Hardly a typical Tuesday." Rowan smiled wryly. "Tell me about it. But for what it's worth, I believe Zarina truly wants peace. I've gotten to know her well." Harding's gaze sharpened with understanding. Perhaps she'd guessed more of the personal story than Rowan had explicitly shared. Yet she only said, "Then we'd better make sure we're still here to see it. The next atmospheric window is in 6 hours. If you have any messages to beam to your GSF superiors, prep them now. Let's coordinate with Zarina's people and see if we can't wrest the galaxy back from the brink." As the hours ticked by, the outpost buzzed with frantic activity. Human engineers worked side by side with Vishari technicians who had accompanied Oryx, rigging an elaborate antenna array to punch through the planet's electromagnetic interference. Once every system was calibrated, the plan was to broadcast a joint statement, an unprecedented gesture in which Empress Zarina and Captain Harding would formally announce an alliance, urging all rational parties to stand down from hostilities. Rowan joined the effort, leveraging his familiarity with both human and Vishari devices. On the roof of the command building, he found a pair of Vishari specialists realigning a dish, their elongated limbs making quick work of the heavy plating. They nodded politely at him, seemingly unperturbed by the knowledge of their Empress's hybrid child. Perhaps word hadn't spread too widely among the rank and file, or perhaps they were among the open-minded minority that Zarina had managed to gather. The storm outside waxed and waned in unpredictable bursts. Gusts of wind raked the base with needle-sharp ice pellets. Visibility dropped to near zero, then cleared for minutes before the snow whirled again in a fresh barrage. Through it all, Rowan couldn't shake the tension coiled in his gut. They were on a razor's edge. Any sign of trouble could trigger conflict. Finally, the comm array blinked green. In the command center, Harding, Oryx, and Zarina stood around a central hollow projector. The flickering image of a galaxy map hovered in the air, dotted with flashing icons representing known Vishari fleet positions and human outposts. "We have a narrow window of stable ionospheric conditions," one of the techs announced. "Communications link is green-lit on our end." Oryx nodded, then turned to Zarina. "My Empress, are you ready?" Zarina took a steadying breath. She glanced at Rowan, and in that one look he sensed her resolve was bolstered by something deeper, hope for a future that once seemed impossible. She turned her gaze to the projector. "Yes, begin broadcasting." The overhead lights dimmed and a camera drone pivoted in front of her, capturing her image to transmit across local space. She spoke in a measured, regal tone that carried the weight of her station. "To all Vishari forces within range of my voice, this is Empress Zarina addressing you with a matter of utmost gravity. The recent cataclysm at our outpost and my subsequent disappearance have sparked rumors. Some blame human interference. Some call for war." She paused, letting her words echo. "But know this, I have returned willingly after securing discussions with the humans. I have discovered that our species is not only compatible in diplomacy, but in ways we never imagined. The time for old prejudices is over. We stand on the threshold of a new era, one that could unite us or destroy us, depending on the choices we make now. I call upon all loyal citizens of the Empire to reject the path of bloodshed championed by High Warlord Clyer and his zealots. Instead, join me in forging a pact of cooperation with the human colonies, for the survival and prosperity of us all." Harding stepped forward then, her voice broadcast beside Zarina's, albeit in a more clipped manner. "On behalf of the human settlements in this sector, we affirm our desire for peaceful relations. We stand ready to engage in trade, mutual defense pacts, and scientific collaboration. We request any GSF vessels or outposts to refrain from aggressive actions against Vishari ships bearing the Empress's insignia. Let us stand united against those who would plunge our two peoples into a pointless war." The feed went silent. Oryx cleared his throat. "That signal should reach anyone within a few systems, at least if the storm doesn't scramble it. Now we wait, and hope Clear doesn't move faster than we can prepare." The wait proved agonizing. For nearly 24 standard hours, there was no response. No transmissions, no fleet movements that they could detect. The outpost sensors occasionally picked up phantom readings, perhaps caused by the planet's magnetic storms. Tension simmered as the Vishari entourage paced anxiously. Harding's troops remained vigilant, scanning the horizon for any sign of approaching vessels. Rumors flew among the humans. Some believed the broadcast would only provoke Claire to strike, while others held out hope that cooler heads in the Empire would rally behind Zarina. During this lull, Rowan and Zarina managed rare moments of solace, taking refuge in the storage alcove or a quiet corner of the base. At one point, she asked to see the GSF medical station, an impromptu checkup to ensure the pregnancy continued without complications. The human medtech staff, initially flustered at the prospect of examining alien royalty, soon discovered that the child's vitals were stable but showed a curious pattern of accelerated development, particularly in neural scans. A faint energy field, perhaps a byproduct of combined Vaishari and human genetics, pulsed through Zarina's body. None of the medtechs had any precedent for this phenomenon, but the readings were consistent with healthy growth. Afterward, Zarina leaned on a metal examination table, looking at holographic projections of the child's vitals. Rowan stood beside her, reading the data. "Everything seems normal from what little we can interpret," he said, trying to offer reassurance. She nodded, expression thoughtful. "In the Empire, births are usually accompanied by elaborate rituals, ensuring the child's genetic lineage remains pure," she murmured. "But this time we have no such rituals. Our child is already rewriting the rules. It's as if nature herself decided the old traditions no longer apply." He wrapped an arm around her shoulders, careful not to jostle her. "Our child will have a chance to see both worlds if we succeed in uniting them. There'll be a living testament that the galaxy doesn't have to be carved into us and them." Zarina managed a smile, though her golden eyes glimmered with concern. "I worry about the hostility they might face from both sides. The future we're shaping could be extraordinary, or it could be brutal if we fail." Before he could respond, a siren whooped through the corridors. They both stiffened. "Attention!" Harding's voice came over the intercom. "We're detecting multiple hyperspace signatures inbound to the system. All personnel to alert status." Rowan and Zarina traded urgent looks, then hurried toward the command center. When they arrived, the holo display was lit with new contacts flickering on the edge of the system. Oryx stood before it, analyzing data. "They're Vishari ships," he said. "A lot of them." Harding's mouth was set in a grim line. "Our sensors confirm at least a dozen warships. No attempt at stealth, they're coming in hot. We tried sending a greeting, but no response yet." Zarina's hands curled into fists. "Clear. He's either come to crush us or force a final confrontation. If he's brought the main battle group, this outpost could be hard-pressed to hold." The planet's swirling storms again made orbital tracking difficult, yet each fresh data point showed the incoming fleet drawing closer. No more speculation. Clyre was here, likely to challenge Zarina's claim in dramatic fashion. Harding called an emergency briefing in the hangar. They had minutes, maybe an hour at best, before the ships arrived. The tension was electric as humans and Vishari stood in uneasy formation, waiting for the plan of defense or negotiation. Zarina ascended a makeshift platform of cargo crates, posture erected, armor catching the overhead lights. Rowan and Oryx flanked her. "Soldiers of the Empire," she began, her voice echoing off metal walls, "and defenders of this human outpost. We stand at a pivotal moment. High Warlord Clyre seeks to enforce the old dogma of xenophobia, to reject the future we have glimpsed. He believes fear will keep us divided. Let us prove him wrong." Oryx stepped forward. "Our scanners show multiple warships in low orbit, likely forming a blockade. Clyre may demand the Empress surrender herself, or he may try to annihilate this base." He paused. "But if we present a unified front, we can force him to negotiate. Our hope is that not all ships in his fleet share his fanaticism. Some might defect if they see their Empress is alive, resolute, and allied with honorable humans." Captain Harding exchanged a glance with Rowan. "We're outgunned, but we have a strong ground defense. If Clyre lands troops, we can at least make it costly for him. Our best bet is that your presence, Empress, will cause hesitation among his ranks." Zarina swept her gaze across the assembly. "Yes, I will meet him on my terms. Here on the surface, where he cannot bombard us without risking my life and, thus, his legitimacy. He claims to serve the Empire. Let him show that by sparing me." Rowan felt a knot tighten in his gut. The plan hinged on the assumption that Clyre still feared turning the Empire against him if he killed the Empress outright. But a zealot with enough backing might do the unthinkable anyway. His gaze drifted to Zarina's abdomen, hidden by armor. He couldn't shake the impulse to protect her, protect their child. When the briefing concluded, he caught up to her as the crowd dispersed to stations. "If things go south," he murmured, voice low, "you get out. I'll buy time if I have to." She rested a hand on his cheek. "I have no intention of leaving you behind again, but I can't flee from my own empire. If I did, Clear would dominate unchallenged. We have to be bold, or we lose everything." Her eyes glinted with steely resolve. "Trust me." Then she moved off, conferring with Oryx in rapid Vishari, preparing for the confrontation. Time stretched thin, the swirling storms above parted briefly, revealing multiple streaks of atmospheric entry. Dropships. The outpost's perimeter sensors flagged them as inbound targets. Harding's squads took up defensive positions behind barricades and energic fences. Vishari warriors loyal to Zarina knelt alongside human rifle squads, an unprecedented display of unity. Rowan climbed to a vantage point on the outpost wall, scanning the horizon through a scope. Sure enough, a line of sleek craft cut through the snow-laden sky, kicking up plumes of white as they settled on a nearby plateau. The ramps lowered, and soldiers in ornate armor marched out, forming ranks. One figure, taller than all the rest, stepped forward. Even from a distance, Rowan recognized the imposing silhouette, High Warlord Clyer in full ceremonial battle regalia. He raised his halberd, crackling with purple energy, and roared a challenge. It carried across the wind, the translator in Rowan's helmet picking up only fragments. "Empress, surrender, purification, abomination." Rowan's blood froze. He glanced over the battlements to see Zarina stride out of the base's main gate, Oryx at her side, Harding and a small honor guard following. The final confrontation was about to begin. If diplomacy failed here, the system could drown in blood. And within Zarina's womb, a new future pulsed with life, so fragile, yet so important that the entire empire teetered on its fate. Rowan clenched his jaw, checking the charge on his pulse rifle. "Please," he whispered to no one in particular, "let reason prevail." Looking back on everything that happened, from the desperate crash landing to the final face-off against fanaticism, it's hard not to feel inspired by the courage and hope that emerged from near-impossible odds. In the end, Empress Serena and Commander Rowan proved that trust can conquer even the greatest barriers, bridging two worlds with a single remarkable child. Their unity sparked a monumental shift in Vishari society, challenging old prejudices and opening a path toward peaceful cooperation with humanity. From a personal perspective, I find their determination uplifting. It reminds us that sometimes the boldest steps forward are the ones taken together, even when everyone says it can't be done. Thank you for staying with us through this unforgettable adventure. If you enjoyed the story, please leave your comments and insights below. We'd love to hear your thoughts on interspecies alliances, unforeseen destinies, and whether love really can change the stars. Remember to subscribe so you never miss out on more exciting stories just around the corner.